Alright, so I seem to have misplaced the solder, so I'll cut this together for the electrical section later. But one of the things I don't see anybody doing, which I find a little odd, is that everyone solders the leads onto the motor. Good connection, that's fine. Why? At least for all motors, right? So this Holmes Hobby motor has, it's kind of hard to see in there, this Holmes Hobby motor has those gold tabs on it. So you could solder onto it, but then if you ever need to take it off, it's kind of a pain. So these are spade terminals from the automotive world, the real automotive world, and these clip on with more than enough force to those gold spade terminals to be totally fine, and that makes them removable from the motor. So if you need to take your motor out, you don't need to worry about soldering them off or back on. So these are really simple. You can get them at any auto store for very cheap. Is basically they come pre-stripped, and that's about what we need in there. You stick them in, you make sure your wire is up to you know, pretty there's a stopper in there. So in this case these are actually soldered or stripped too short, so I'm going to strip a little more back with my strippers. These are just standard, you know, strippers you can get at any hardware store. I do like the ones that are labeled. This is 14 gauge wire. If you have a Hobbywing 1080, it's nice and clearly labeled on the wires. Use some nice high quality wire there, no guessing. So give those a little twist like you always would. Stick the wire. I'll get you a little closer here. Stick the wire in until you hit that little bump stop right there. Then you need a set of pliers that has this little bump on it, basically. And this one side of this thing has a notch in it. So you take the side that has the bump, you put it on top of there, a little bit back from the end, and you just squeeze, give it a good squeeze, don't go too much, and that's it. It's on. It's secure. I usually give it a little wrap of electrical tape just to give it a little bit of additional insulation, but instead of having to worry about soldering for your motor, you can pop it in and out whenever you want. And it is just much easier, in my opinion. And I've been running this in my TRX4 now for a bit, and have had no problems with power transfer. Get a good little crimp, and we're good. Grab a little bit of electrical tape and wrap them up, just for that little extra bit of security and waterproofing. But you really don't even need to do this. And I do not, and I screwed that piece of electrical tape up. I don't know why more people aren't doing this. Maybe if you're running something huge on 8S, maybe you'd have a problem, but these terminals are meant for, you know, real cars. So I don't see any problem. So, as with all electrical tape jobs, you do a terrible job and hope nobody ever sees it, except for, you know, the whole internet. Yeah, and that's that. So, I was really hoping to get the soldering done tonight, but I have turned my workbench and most of my garage upside down looking for it, and I just couldn't find it, so I will edit that in next. And you will see that with the rest of the electrical video. So we are soldering the Traxxas connectors onto the ESC. I chopped off the XT60s, I think, and I found my solder now. So, actually I found my original solder, but I also picked up some much finer solder, which should make my job a little easier. Now, full disclaimer, I am not good at soldering. I am still learning. So this will be kind of a very, I am a beginner with soldering. I've got my soldering iron over here. I will say that these little, I think they're called helping hands, are vital, at least if you're a beginner. And the main trick I've found is that you really want to make sure these have the right pressure on them first. So I'm going to first you clean your prime the tip, which it looks like that's not hot enough. So turn it up. I wish this soldering iron had a readout, because I know exactly what this stuff melts at, but those are way more money, and I don't do that much soldering. So, alright, now I think we're starting to get some melting. Yep. There we go. So I'm basically, I've watched a bunch of YouTube tutorials on this. There are, as I said, far better people than me to instruct you on this, but I'm doing it for the sake of the build. So if you need to solder and you don't know how, probably look up a guide from somebody other than me, because admittedly I do not know what I am doing. I'm not a professional at this. So my father-in-law basically told me you should heat up the piece of metal below instead of just the wire. So you start by heating the metal below. That way it's a bit warmer, and then feed this in. And you don't want that to happen, where you get the solder stuck. So I will point out with these Traxxas connectors, so this is a Traxxas kit. This is kit 3070X here, which is for attaching to ESCs. I seem to have lost one of the blades, but I've got 2 extras. I'll find it at some point. So these blades, it says this in the instruction, but this is the side for the wire, and it says wire side engraved on it. So you want to solder the wire right there, because these tabs sit very flush. They're designed very specifically to sit there. So it's super hot still. I don't know why I touched it. I'm an idiot. And we're going to set the next one up. I've got my Traxxas connector. These are clearly labeled plus and minus. One of the things in the directions for the soldering kit is you're really not supposed to have the solder extend past the little line that's marked on it. I went over a little bit. We're going to see if I can still make it work. I think I'll be able to. So the other thing I've learned about this from doing it a previous time is you really don't want to push on the wire. You want to try to push on the actual connector if you can. And it's tricky, actually. I think I want a bigger pair. These, unfortunately, I only have one size up handy, but this actually might work. I can put one side. Yeah, so I've literally got the bottom clamped here and the top on the gold piece. So that's most of the way in. Now I'm going to take something small and flat, like a hex driver, and use it to force it the rest of the way in. If it'll go the rest of the way in. If I recall, this piece snaps pretty hard, and it might not work because of my solder job. So I think I'm going to have to pull some solder off. So if you can see this, which get under the light here, if you can see this, the gold connector is supposed to come to the end of that black piece, and I've got a bit of a gap. Now, I didn't think I messed up soldering by that much. So I'm going to try again here. Yeah, it is not coming. So I'm going to force this back out. Same thing, small tip, but from the other side. So I can go ahead and get a hold of it with my pliers. Now, I definitely went past that line, but only by like a millimeter, and I was short by like a centimeter. So let me just try it again. Oh, God, that does not want to move. Let's see how, if the red one, oopsie, if the positive side will go. Nope. Alright, so I'm gonna have to back them out with the solder. That is very unfortunate. I set the soldering up, I'll be right back. Alright, those both look better. So, we'll try this again, starting with the cool one. Use my pliers here again. That's much better. We're still not quite there. I'm actually going to use something bigger. So I'm still a little hair short, but I'm pretty sure the last one I did was also like that. So it's fine. To our red side, which slides in easier. Positive, red, whatever you want to call it by. Yep, and that's pretty good. So we're in. Both of them are almost all the way to the end. They could be a little further, but I'm happy with that as a rookie solderer. So now, last thing to do is I did put these heat shrink sleeves on that you find in the automotive world. The Traxxas kit actually does come with them. And I'm going to stick those in there, get out my lighter. And the trick to doing this is that you don't want to get too close or you melt your wires. I had a computer light on fire because I did that. You can also use something like a hair dryer or a heat gun, which is a little safer for your wires, but this is what I have handy if you're really in a pinch. you can use your soldering iron. But I'll be honest, that doesn't come out very well. It takes forever. It's not super good. Alright, so our ESC is converted to Traxxas connectors. Alright, so since the last time you've seen the chassis, I've made a lot of progress here. Installing the lights and doing the cable management, there's so much fine detail work. I had to just do it off camera. Otherwise, it would have just been a time lapse where it wouldn't have been in frame half the time because, you know, like sitting back in my chair with it on my lap. So cable management is an art. I have a lot of experience building computers, as well as some other RCs. This is the hardest thing I've ever cable managed. That being said, I have a ton of lights in here. So I've got all of the lights installed at this point. And we've got the factory light bar. We've got our yellow headlights. We've got our MytrickRC rock lights on both sides. In the rear, we have the 3 red brake lights and the 2 orange yellow hazard lights. And then I have the exhaust lighting in here as well. I can't put that on until I've got the body panels on, so I can't really click that in yet. So as far as cable management, what I'm doing is I've mounted the receiver in the gas tank, the fuel cell, like they suggested. I've got my ESC mounted on the left, and my light controller mounted on the right. I removed the wire channel thing. So in the front, I'm running the wires pretty much through where they intend you to, and in the rear, the same. I have this, in the rear you'll also note, I have this 3D printed rear bulkhead. These are free on Thingiverse. Really, you know, helps keep stuff from coming off the rear wheels going into the motor area. So I did have to run everything right through the center, which was particularly challenging. So what I've kind of done here, I've got my power button, the ESC right here. I should be able to reach up under that front wheel well and grab it without having to take the body off, I'm hoping. If not, I'm going to have to try to mount it up in the battery tray somewhere. I've got my power connector run through. When you're running the power connector through, particularly if you're using a bigger connector, you're probably going to have to undo the 2 screws that move the battery tray, at least some, slide it out and get this through, and then slide it back in. So tips for cable management: zip ties are your best friend. In this case, you want nice small zip ties. In this case, I'm using a clearish white for most of them because, you know, it goes with the cage. I've also got a whole bag of these little sticky zip tie squares that you can mount zip ties to stuff. And then additionally, if you're really trying to get fancy with cable management, you're going to need extensions. These are the 3-pin extensions that, you know, pretty much plug into your receiver. And you can see in the back here, I have actually sleeved some of the cables that are particularly loud, right? So these are, the red ones are black and red, the yellow ones are black and yellow. You can kind of see some black and yellow in there. But I wrapped all of those in this sheathing where it's visible from the outside, to just make it look a lot cleaner. Inside, you don't want this sheathing. This sheathing is hard to bend and work with. It's pretty easy though. It's just, you know, it's slit down the center and you just kind of open it up, stick your wire in, and let it wrap around itself. So when you're doing cable management like this, some tips. If possible, try to keep, for me, what I try to do is I try to keep all of my car electronics on one side. So by that I mean wires that run my ESC, battery wires, receiver wires, and then all of my lights on the other side. So I have my motor leads, which, you know, won't be coming through the door. These are all of my receiver wires. I've got the receiver wires in there. I've got, you know, both of them plugged in. I think they're the right way, but because they're extensions, I can very easily swap them inside the cage if I have to. I can also unplug them from right here, and I don't have to, you know, feed them back out that way. So I probably almost never need to take the receiver box off. So bundle everything up. You know, I'd recommend doing loose zip ties until you've kind of got everything figured out, and then crank it down. If you've got a lot of zip ties, it's not a big issue because you can just clip them off and redo them. And yeah, so you bundle everything up and make it as clean as possible, right? So like the only purpose of this zip tie right here is to crank this wire over here. This one is probably also going to end up over there once I have the motor in, because this one should be going to the motor, I believe. And yeah, so, you know, I've got them, you know, the same with this side. I cranked them over, I tied them over here. But most everything, right, is just tied in a big bundle over here. I should have enough clearance to the motor. It's gonna be a little tight, but I think it'll be okay. Got the rock lights in the rear as well. And the wiring here, you know, I had to make up a couple special connectors. So for example, I didn't buy, MytrickRC offers everything, but I needed to go a 2-plug to 1-plug for the receiver for the brake lights to have them actually function. So I had to make those, but I had a whole bag of connectors. You know, I just stripped the wires off some of them and twisted them together to make a 2-to-1 splitter. This process, just cable management on this, has taken me about 2 hours. Doing nothing but running wires and figuring out where they go. But that time is the time that's the difference between opening up, you know, when you see somebody take the shell of their car off and it's a snarled mess of wires, versus this, right? So one of the things that wires do that people don't really think about is that wires inhibit airflow. It's a bigger issue generally, I think, in PC cases, but I want good airflow around my motor since there's no active cooling on it. Same with the ESC. Like, I don't want to have like 400 wires sitting right on top of the ESC insulating it and making it heat up more and more and more and more. So doing this good cable management, in addition to be aesthetically pleasing for those of us with some OCD, does actually offer a benefit of better cooling. So once my driver panel dries out the rest of the way, I'm gonna throw that up in there. I'm hoping I can get it past all the wires without damaging anything. Okay, now I apologize, I haven't been filming everything. Some of these steps are really hard to do, and I'm like literally, you know, hunched over my chair cramming things in. So in the manual, it tells you to put the driver's panel in way earlier before you put any of the electronics in. Although it makes cable management way harder, I think I would probably suggest doing that. I had to crank on that thing to get it in there. When you're doing it, what you want to do is you want to back the drivers in with their helmets in first. So you basically want to pull the chairs up so their helmets are here and it's angled way down, and then you pivot the front up. Now the problem with me doing that is I had all the wires in there already. The wires survived, I think. I mean, I haven't function tested them, but I didn't have to crank anything the wires too hard, but I really had to bend that panel around. I also damaged it in a couple of places. I've got a couple little paint job scratches because I finished painting this 45 minutes ago, and I was like, oh, let's put it in, it'll dry in place. You should also wait overnight to install it. So it goes in with just 4 little 2.5mm screws. 3 of these went in pretty easy for me. This one I really had to kind of like pull on the driver over to get it to line up, but it's in. In addition, I've got the fuel cell closed up. So our cable management is pretty much done. I'm going to start bolting body panels on at this point. So I'm going to set you up for that, and we'll watch it really take shape. The one kind of exception there is that I can't put the side panels on until I've got the put it back on the chassis, because I have the extended side panels that come to here and they block the shock shaft screws. So in order for me to take the frame off, I have to take the body panel off, which isn't ideal. But it is what it is. So, all right, before we get to restart. All right, before we get too much further, I want to review the paint job. So, overall, I'm very happy with how it currently looks. There's a couple things I would have done differently. I think, honestly, I might have assembled the cage and painted it assembled if I were going to do it again. The main reason for that is that you get some differences in shading depending on how I was spraying. So like this piece is a lot more silver than that piece. And if I'd assembled it, I wouldn't have that problem. It's minor, the hood's going to be sitting there. It'll be pretty unnoticeable, especially once the rig gets, you know, a little dented and scratched. But it's still, you know, something I notice. Additionally, I want to go over my main concern with this is how my paint job's gonna hold up here. Now, as I said earlier, I couldn't find anybody who had really done any real painting on nylon. Everybody online just dyes it, which is fine and dandy if you want to go darker, sorry, but if you want to go lighter, it doesn't work at all. This was a black/dark gray cage, so there's just, you know, no way that dye was going to work. So to recap, what I did, right, is I used this nylon primer from Tamiya, and this one came from Amazon.jp. I was not able to find it on any US websites. It's in Japanese and everything. So I started with that. Then I put down the Tamiya TS paint, which is, you know, for hard bodies. This is not what you use on the Lexan panels. This is their hard body paint. Because this stuff, although it's flexible, it's a hell of a lot harder than the Lexan. Once I had that down, I did the super fine mist coat of the Tamiya PS36 silver. They don't make a TS in translucent silver, so I had to use that one. And then after that super fine coat, I did the Tamiya TS13 high gloss clear coat. So I like how it looks. If it holds up, I'll be really happy. I do already have some stress fractures from, you know, that's where I put a screw in and I over tightened a little bit. So I'm a little worried about that. In addition, on the metal, on the metal, I used the traditional TS, the Tamiya primer for TS. So this was just the gray regular primer you can pick up in any store. Then I did the white, then I did the silver, and then I did the clear again. However, on the back side here, luckily it's the inside, so I was attempting to hot glue one of the scale exhausts on, and it came off, and it just stripped the paint right clear. Now that's obviously a glue pulling, and that's not going to be happening on the outside anywhere, but I'm concerned. I'm thinking maybe I should have just used, you know, like a Rust-Oleum from Home Depot or something to that effect. The Lexan panel, watch my prep section and the recap section on that. I'm not going to recap that right now. It's standard Lexan painting, just a lot of X-Acto knifing. And then for my scale look in the back here, I primed this piece with the nylon primer. I sprayed it exclusively with the translucent silver until it was that color. Because it was a gray primer, it came out really good and aluminum looking. And then I hit it with that TS clear again. Now for the red details and the black dots, and this brown gas spill, which it came out a little darker than I wanted it to. This is the Citadel paints, and I think it came out just absolutely phenomenal. And I'm super happy with how that came out. And then, yeah, with the helmets, right, that was the Citadel paints as well. So, very happy overall with how the paint job came out, as long as it holds up. So I'm really hoping I won't have to buy a new cage for this and repaint it if, you know, I take one hit and it cracks like, you know, an inch of paint off. So we'll see how it goes. I am taking my shocks apart as I stated earlier. I think these springs are too heavy. I thought they came with tuning springs, as the 100mm non-reservoir versions do. But they make the 100mm spring set that you can buy. Now, you should note that this package is good for 2 springs, not 4. I ordered one and had to order another, so that came in later. So what you get with this kit is you get a full set of long springs. These are all twined together. I don't need any of these. I'm not going to bother with that. And then you get basically a 3 different stiffnesses of spring. You get 3 different full-length springs if you're running a traditional setup. You get 3 different 3/4 length springs and 3 different 1/4 length springs, or maybe it's 2/3 and 1/3 probably. But if you stack these on top of each other, they are just about the length of a full-length spring. They're a little bit longer, but not by much. So what you need to do is figure out what the proper weight is for your truck. So I know that this spring is a little too heavy. So I'm going to basically kind of just squeeze it out here and figure out which set is the same. So the stiff spring from the aftermarket kit is way firmer, so these are definitely out. We're not going to use this bottom row. Okay, so the medium spring feels about the same as what was in it. So the stock ones that come with the Desert Lizard reservoirs appear to be the mediums from Yeah Racing. And then this is very light. So with it running full droop with nothing under it, I think this was just too heavy. However, what I'm going to do here is I'm going to be running a partially drooped setup. So I actually do think the medium is about correct. When I'm running, so basically what I'm going to be doing is this is going to be running in the traditional spring location, and this is going to be running on top, on bottom, right, trying to suck the suspension up. So I'm going to try the mediums. I'll move you over a little bit so you can see what I'm doing here. So I've got my shock apart. Also, trick with these reservoir shocks. So this is a little vise I've 3D printed. I was having a really hard time, right, filling this. Filling that is easy. Filling the other side of the shock, you know, the standard shock is easy, but trying to fill this hose is miserable. So if you assemble this top half first, you can fill right in there to help you fill the hose and not need to try to get it into such a tiny hole, while not spilling everywhere. So that's a great tip for that. So I want this to be running in a semi-sprung configuration. So I'm going to put my short spring in first. Wait, no, sorry, I'm doing this backwards. Apologies. Pop that back out of there. That would still be technically semi-sprung, but it'd be sprung in the wrong way. So I want it to try to suck the suspension up pretty hard. So I'm putting my 2/3 spring in first. I'm going to stick my shock shaft in. I'm going to knock all the springs out, or all the O-rings out, of course, to make my life hard. I was hoping they'd stay in. Alright, and then I'm going to put this spring on top, where they would normally go. Now before I do that, I need to fill... Oh wait, yeah, so I'm going to put this spring on top, and then, but before I get to that, I'm going to kind of reassemble the lower half here. So yeah, this is a lot less power, just because the spring itself, although it's the same tension, the spring is shorter. So it doesn't have quite as much force under it trying to suck it up. So we're going to slide these guys on. This is, you know, exactly what I did previously. except now I'm covered in silicone lubricant because I had to dump them. And there's no good way to dump them. Put a bunch of paper towels down and just dump them onto paper towels. Now we're going to slide these two on, and I can adjust those later. Put our shock end on. Right, okay. So, and we're back to pretty much where we were, but the difference now is we're going to take, well, first we're going to put shock oil in. So, I'm going to start with some of the shock oil. I'm not going to put all of it in. Again, cycle your suspension. Get some of it in there. I'm going to put a little bit more. Cycle it in there. Now I'm going to take the other spring, apologies, that's probably in the way, and drop that in the top. And I'm going to continue to fill. You hear that sucking noise, means you're purging air out of the system, which is exactly what we want. I don't know if these technically qualify as big bore shocks, but they definitely take a good amount. Not like an X-Max, but they take a good amount of silicone. Alright, and now I'm just getting the little tiny bubbles in there, which means I've got all of the stuff out the bottom. And that's pretty much ready to go back together. Now, before I put this back together, I'm going to go put a little bit more oil in the top cap. Actually, you know what? No, I'm not, because it's going to push it in. So, without dropping everything. Alright, so I'm going to, and this is going to be a little harder this time to thread because I am actually pushing a spring down. And I've got the reservoir dangling off, which is wonderful. Alright, there we go. It's getting very slippery. I'm going to grab my paper towels. Spin that on. And now we've got a little bit of cushion underneath, but it still tries to suck up. So that should work much better. I'm going to give that shock shaft a little grab. My 4mm if I can. Yeah, it'll stay put. Yeah, so there we go. Now we're running, although we're still running with this spring trying to pull everything back down, we have a little bit of cushion in there, which is much better. So I'm going to go ahead and swap the other ones over to medium springs on all of them in the exact same fashion, and we'll be back. So I've gone ahead and rebuilt my shocks with the proper springs, as you should have just seen. So now they've got some down travel and some up travel. And at this point, I've done all the cable management, which we've talked about previously. And we are ready for the final mating of the body and the chassis. Hopefully final. So, we're going to start mating this up. Now, this is obviously going to be a fair bit more complicated than it was when there was no wires in here. So, what I'm going to do is I'm going to lay this off to the side. I'm going to pull all my wires that are unnecessary out the door panel and flip them over. So the first thing I'm going to do, and actually I might do a test fit here to make sure I'm spinning the right direction, is that I'm going to put my spades onto my motor terminal here. So remember, in the electronics section, I put these spade terminals on from the automotive world instead of the traditional soldering to the motor. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to stick these on And I'm actually going to test fire this for the first time here, because if these are on backwards, I will need to swap these. I guess I could technically reverse it in the motor, but I'd rather just swap them here. This one's a little loose. I did not have that the last time I did this, but that's very easy to remedy. You just take your pliers and give it a little crimp so it's a little tighter. And pop it on. You can go too tight, but I don't think I did. All right, so we've got that. I'm gonna put power to it for the very first time, and pair it with my controller, which I'm realizing I probably need to open the fuel cell again to do. I thought I was done back there. So for my controller, I use a Futaba T4PM. Use it on all of my rigs that I've built, and a few I have switched over. So we're gonna get this paired first, which means I need to flip this back over and open that up. So we're gonna do that real quick. All right, so we've got the fuel cell opened. We've got the motor hooked up. I'm gonna put my power to the rig up front. This is a little tricky with it disassembled, just because it's very unwieldy. I think this battery only has a storage charge, but that should be completely sufficient for what we are doing. So we've got power to it. Moment of truth. Let's turn it on and see what happens. All right, we get a beep. That's a very good start. Oh, I'm also realizing I don't have my servos and things hooked up yet, so we're going to hook those up right now. All right, so we're going to turn it back on again. There we go. We're looking for those beeps. I'm going to turn my Futaba on over here. I'm not going to do full how to program this at the moment, but I'm going to go and select my Capra, which I've already made a profile for. I overwrote a different rig that I sold. So switching to the Capra. So now I just need to pair this, which I believe is under receiver. Nope. Wait, was it? Link, execute. So I push that. It starts beeping. I take a little, anything you can use. I push the button on the receiver. And I got a boop boop out of that. There we go. So, moments of truth here. Did I hook everything up correctly? Alright, steering is on the correct servo. Alright, which way is this going? Alright, they're hooked up correctly. So, in my case, with, I think this is a normal rotation motor, I believe, blue is positive. So, forward works. Backwards works, and let's see if I can figure out how to make my dig work. I've actually never used the third channel on this. So I want to talk about setting your endpoints here. So I've got the rig powered up, right? Throttle works fine. I'm going to do steering endpoints later. The dig. First off, this odd color scheme that EcoPower uses. Orange is white, brown is black. I had it in backwards, nothing was working. Second, so at least on my controller, my endpoints were massive, massively too far. So I'm working on setting my endpoints here. If you don't set your endpoints, you're gonna smoke this servo no matter what kind it is, even if you're using the crappy one. So this is a little harder than setting endpoints on steering lock, because steering lock, right, you can turn it and you can listen. I can't hear this one moving. So I can keep pushing the endpoint, and at some point, instead of moving the dig servo, it starts moving, it starts like twisting the mount. So, and then on top of that, you need to be like using some power when you're doing it. So I'm very, in this case, I'm adjusting the left endpoint, so I'm very carefully watching this gap here by adjusting the trim, so you can see nothing's happening there. So I'm way too far. So there you go. You see it starting to back off. And So it's still moving in. So it's still moving in. I think that's the end of it. If I keep going, yeah, the servo mount starts to torque. So I'm going to keep going back until I see it move. I'm going one at a time. And I'm still pretty far away. Okay, there we go. Okay. I think right there is about it. So I've got that side. Now I'm going to do the opposite endpoint. So I hit my switch. It goes to the other. Technically, you can tune a neutral into this one, but I've heard it's really hard. So now I'm setting the right endpoint. And see, like, it stopped moving and it started twisting the chassis. I'm not sure if you can see that on camera. But you want a little bit of power to this. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to set the endpoint about there. I'm going to flip. That starts moving. I'm going to flip back. See, so that's not far enough. I flipped it over, but it's not enough torque to lock the rear end. So I'm going to flip it. I'm going to stop moving it. I'm going to adjust the endpoint again. That goes quite a ways. Right there, I think, is probably about right. So we're frozen. Swap it. They both start moving. Swap it back. It locks up immediately. Excellent. That's what you want to see. And it doesn't feel like it's straining. Alright, so I've got these endpoints adjusted now. It's a little tricky. In my particular case, 100 is full throw in each direction. I've got the left one set at 28 and the right one set to 13. So if you don't set your endpoints on these servos, that's probably why you're blowing them up. I know everybody's complaining about the Spectrum one. This is an EcoPower, but I mean, this thing is using 15% of its throw. So as you can see now, I'm locked. The rear end is locked up. Actually, maybe the rear end's at neutral right now. Oh, interesting. Hold on a second. So that's four-wheel. Four-wheel works good. I hit it again. Okay, and we're going to neutral there. So I actually need to go further. Okay, so that's going quite a bit further over. Alright, so let's try this again. So, four-wheel. And this should be locked. There we go. Yeah, we're fully locked now. So, you can hit neutral, but there you go. The wheels might rotate like a quarter turn, but then it'll freeze. So I actually want to set this with it locked. Okay, so see, I'm starting to push the chassis around. So yeah, so there we go. Front wheel only, rear completely frozen. Four wheel, functioning dig. There you have how to set up your dig endpoints. Alright, so if you've never programmed an ESC, it varies a bit from ESC to ESC. This Hobbywing 1080, basically you plug the program card that comes with it into this right port, and note the negative side. So you want the negative side to match up with your black wire, and then you plug the other end into the 3 pins on the Hobbywing 1080. The black goes towards the outside. And then pretty much all you do here is you go through, and each value is listed on the front and back. So for number 1, by default, it's set to go forward and reverse. So basically you pull the trigger, you let go, and you go, if you go forward, it goes into brake. Now this thing should have more than enough drag brake to not need brake. So I am going to leave it in forward and reverse only. So I'll just hit OK. It programs it. I go to the next one. It's set to LiPo. So I'm going to leave that alone. Hit OK. Go to the next one. 3, cutoff voltage. It's set to medium. I'll leave that there. Hit OK. Initial start force. Now this is, if you have a cheaper controller, this is going to be a one you may want to leave on something other than 0. For For me, I'm going to put it on 1. So basically when I pull the trigger, it'll start right at 0. So if you want to change the value, you just click this value button until you get to the desired number. So 4 I want on setting number 1. I hit OK and it changes it. So now we're going to go to number 5, which is max forward force. Now there's basically no reason you would ever want this at anything other than 100. Unless maybe you had you're training a kid or something, maybe you want to turn it down so they can't go full speed. So we're going to put that there. Now we switch to the back, max reverse force. I don't like going to 100%. I think that's a little too aggressive. So I back this down to number 3 at 75%, and they actually started on number 2, which is 50%. Actually, you know what? I'm going to leave it on number 2. I'll leave it at 50% for now. I can always change it. So max brake force. Again, without the brakes, I don't have brake enabled, but I'm going to just set it to 100%. So right, this is number 7. Yeah, 100%. So I want it at number 9. So value up. Oh wait, 6. Wait, am I on the wrong one? Oh, I'm on max reverse force still. So I want 50 for that. Whoops, 50. Number 7. Yeah, we want it at 9. It's at 9. Apologies, just a moment. All right. Sorry about that. Had a phone call. All right. So we're at max brake force is 100%. That's what we want. Now initial brake force. This is another thing. If you've got a particularly not sensitive controller, maybe you need it higher. I would want it set at 0, which it is already. So I'm going to save that. Number 9 is drag brake. So this is the big one for a crawler. Right when you let off the throttle, what does it do? I want it to just stop in place. So I want the drag brake at 100%. And it's already at 100%. They know their audience for crawlers. Drag brake rate. This one. Okay, so the drag brake rate is how hard it initially kicks in before it kind of ramps up to 100. I'm just going to leave that in the middle at level 4. If you really wanted it to stop fast, you could turn it up, or if you wanted it to really ease on, you could turn it down, but I want to leave it right in the middle. So we're going to go to 11. 11 is your neutral range, so this is how responsive it is to your controller as well. So I have a very good controller, so I'm going to put it at 1, and this is number 11, yeah. Oopsie, value 1. You know what, actually I think I'm going to go with number 2. Alright, so we're setting value 12, which is start mode punch. This is basically how hard it accelerates when you pull the trigger. So if you're running brushed and you put number 9 on there, you might arc the brushes, which isn't good for it. If you're giving it to a kid, you probably want to give it to them on like level 1. If you're I'm a responsible adult, I'm going to leave it on the stock at level 5 and kind of a mid-range value. This setting, 13 PWM frequency, this involves like the audible range that you can like hear it at. I'll be honest, I don't fully understand this one. I'll link a Holmes Hobby video that is far more in-depth than this one, where he goes over these things. I'm going to leave that one at 4 for now. Number 14 is BEC voltage. Okay, so this is a critical one. If you need to know the voltages that your servos can handle. So this is a 7.4 volt servo, and in this case this EcoPower is also a 7.4 volt servo. So if this is only rated for 6 volts and you stick this to 7.4, you will smoke that servo, and that's what I think is happening to a lot of the people with the Spectrum servo. So this is rated for 7.4, so it defaults to 6. I'm gonna kick that up to 7.4, and we're done that. Okay, and our final setting is freewheeling. It comes disabled by default. However, you really want this enabled. So with freewheeling on, basically when you're giving it a little bit of throttle, it will continue to also apply the drag brake. Again, if you want a way more in-depth explanation on this, please go see the Holmes Hobby video. I've got linked in the description. It's far better at explaining these things than I am. So this is all set. I can just power the unit off now, and yeah, so I'll get this unhooked and we will continue on. The next thing I'm going to do is that I am going to use my receiver to power these rock lights from MytrickRC. Now, in order to do this, if you buy just the rock light kit, it does come with this little capacitor to make sure you don't blow the rock lights out. And it just uses that onboard power from the ESC. I do have the front light bar, which similarly could use that same port. For the moment, I'm just going to leave the front light bar disconnected, and I need to get another splice battery kit that pulls the light bar off of the battery. So I will have to do that later. I do not have one of those in stock. And basically all that does is it takes this port, it shoves a thing in behind it that makes contact with the pins, and taps a power unit off of it. So I'm going to put this in here, and again, black is towards me in this case, and I am going to feed this in here. It's pretty tricky to work in here with the body panel on and all of this extra stuff. So I'm going to grab my little pliers and put this on, and the battery tray likes to wiggle, so I'm also like holding the back of the battery tray. There we go, I felt that snap in. So now, when I power it on, these rock lights should come on. Let's see if they do. Oh yeah. Look at those, that is so much light. Okay, we'll turn those off. And actually, hold on, one other thing I wanted to check is I should have lights on the headlights, and I don't. So I think I have to push my, it's probably, there we go. All right, so the MytrickRC lights just come on with a push of a button. It remembers whatever mode you're in last. I need to consult the manual as to what mode I want it in. If I recall, it's mode 4. With MytrickRC, you don't actually get a manual in the box, but they have very good PDF manuals online. So the MyTrick online manual online is quite nice. It gives a nice detailed description of each port you need to plug the lights into. So you basically just figure out which mode you're going to use your vehicle in. And I am going to be using it in full bright with tail, brake, reverse, and backfire. Now I'm not going to have really any brakes here, but so I want it in mode 4. So I should be in mode 1 right now. So I'm going to click it again. Should go to mode 2, click it again, go to mode 3, click it again, go to mode 4. So mode 4 turned my brake lights off entirely. Alright, sorry about that. My camera overheated on me again. It's still very warm. It's 85 in my garage at the moment, which is not ideal. Alright, so for my LED kit, I have it in mode 3, which is dim headlights, dim tail lights, dim runners, and backfire. So after the car sits for a little bit, the lights go into hazard mode where they start to flash. So you can kind of see that blinking on my hand there. Once you give it some throttle, it comes out of that, and so the headlights have come back on. I've got that nice yellow glow. The tail lights do technically have a brake function. If I'm going and I slam on the brakes, they will light, but it just goes into reverse because I'm not using the actual brakes. And then the real fun function, it's a little hard to see down there because they're kind of buried, but when I let off the throttle, the orange LEDs backfire. So we'll do a full demo of this once it's assembled, but now that I've got all the lights in place, minus the light bar, we're going to mate this up again. So I'm going to get it all mated up. You've seen it a couple of times. You know, I'm just going to start with these 4, then I'm going to put the shocks on, and we will get to the next step.